All right, folks, we are back after so long with another episode of Spinster versus Spinster. This is one that I think I chose. Jess and I don't
Yes.
often disagree on films passionately, anyways, but on this we do. So today's movie is 2012's Sinister. And Sinister is on my list of one of my favorite horror films from the 2010s. And
Wow.
yes, how do you feel about it? You think it's overrated.
Yes. Yeah. I think this film is overrated, which is so funny because it's what's like 4 or 5 years ago when I watched this film and like texted to Kelly how I didn't like it. And I couldn't remember why I didn't like this film. So when I was like sitting down this week to watch it, I was like, oh, I've changed a lot as a person in the last 5 years.
Yeah,
Maybe I may
right.
like this film.
Yeah,
Maybe I will see the appeal to it that everyone else loves it.
right.
And then I watched it, and 10 minutes into this movie, I was like, oh, no, I remember why I don't like this film. I do not like this film at all. It has its good points as I've grown a bit. There's some elements in it that I'm just like, ooh, I like this, and ooh, I like this. But then there's just like elements in it that I'm like, I just can't get on board with this film. I don't understand. I also don't understand how it is in the top 50 highest rated horror films, the scariest film of all time in 2020. I don't get that. I don't find this film scary.
Okay, so your story around this film is that, like, did you buy it? Did you rent it? Like, what happened with that?
I unfortunately own this film. So if anyone wants a copy of it, they can have it. I own this film. I randomly.
And I have my own copy.
Yeah. Well, it was like my early days in getting into the horror genre, right? Like I feel like back then I felt like I had to catch up. Like what was like 6-7 years ago, and I'm just like, wow, shit, I've got like so much horror that I need to consume. I need to like catch up with everyone.
Yeah, for sure.
And I would go to places like Odds and Sods or BMVs. Is it BMVs? Yeah. Or like a CD Warehouse or CD Plus and get like cheap DVDs or cheap Blu-rays that are like horror, and Sinister was one of them. So I was like, okay, cool. Everyone talks about this film. Everyone says it's so scary and that is up there with Insidious, blah, 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 blah. And then I watched it and then I was like, Kelly, I feel like this film is overrated.
For me, I actually sat down and thought about this movie today, wondering what my original story was, my origin story for Sinister. And actually, I saw Sinister in the IMAX theater when it came out.
Oh, wow.
Yes. This is one I saw in theater. And definitely was spooked in 2012 when this came out. And I loved it. And I still love it. I've seen it probably like 4 or 5 times since I saw it in theater way back when. So this movie, which I looked up today, was written and directed by the same person who did The Exorcism of Emily Rose. So that's Scott Derrickson. And The Exorcism of Emily Rose is another one that I love and own and I find that one terrifying. Sinister doesn't scare me, but Exorcism of Emily Rose definitely does. Different vibes.
Yeah. Well, we all know how we feel about demonic possession. It is a big no. Big already, no. Like, we go into a demonic possession film, creep factor is already up like 5 for me. I'm just like, we're already here. Let's go. So I agree with you. And that's actually a really interesting point that you said that directed by the same individual, because I also own The Exorcism of Emily Rose. I also find that film very chilling and scary and everything. All the vibes. But it's funny that you mentioned that too, because I was also, when I was looking up some stuff about Sinister earlier, interesting that it was also inspired by a nightmare by C. Robert. So C. Robert Cargill had a nightmare that was inspired by The Ring, the 2002 film, and that's how he ended up deciding to write Sinister, which I could see where some elements are, but not 100%. But I was surprised by that fact. I was like, really? The Ring inspired you to write this film? Okay, you need to go back and do some rewrites, though, and then maybe it'd be a better film.
Maybe. But jumping back with your scariest movie, in 2020, Sinister was labeled the scariest movie ever made by a science. I remember when that article came out a couple of years ago and people were very upset by it. But then last year it was dethroned by Host. So,
which Yeah, that I remember when I saw that news, I was like, appropriate. I get it, but yeah, I definitely remember reading that article early pandemic days and being like, what? What?
Yeah,
no.
Folks, if you haven't heard about this, they did some kind of science experiment, probably not super perfect.
It was based upon the highest average heart rates of 50 viewer participants.
Yes, exactly. They watched over 100 hours of horror movies, and that's where it came from. Not a perfect experiment design study, but let's, we can have some fun with it. So initially this movie did spook me, a long time ago. That's like 10 years ago, actually. Wow. Okay. A decade ago when it came out. Now, not so much. There's the odd jump scare that I know is coming, but sometimes still gets me. So how about, Jess, you start with a brief explanation on why you think this movie is overrated and a couple of key things that you dislike about it.
Oh, goodness. Okay, well, I was originally going to turn this around and be like, here's some of my likes first and then my dislikes, but I'll go into my dislikes first. All right, so there's three main things that I've broken down into why I feel this film is overrated and why I dislike it.
Okay, start with number one. Let's chat about that one first.
Some of the movie elements. So, okay, there are elements in this film that I really like, and we can talk about that later. And there's elements in this film that I very much dislike and find distracting. The overall score. So whenever we are watching the Super 8 films, the found footage, and we have that score playing over, it loses the creep factor for me. I get distracted by it because I'm just like, well, why is he? I'm like, is that music part of the actual Super 8 film? And that's like, and he's hearing that as well, and that's what's creeping him out, or is that just it's just
the cinematic element? Yeah.
But then you see him watch it again later, and there is no music, and that scene creeps me out even more. I'm like, oh, so it's like I find that really distracting, especially because over the years, as we watch more found footage films, I'm like, the less sound, the better.
Yes. No. I can understand that. That is totally valid. However, one of the biggest things about this movie for me is the sound design. I fucking love the sound design. The score, the soundtrack. We have Ulver. Ulver is like a long-standing metal giant. They started in folk and black metal roots. They're now very like ambient and everything, which you hear in this movie. There's also this band called Aghast that does. They're the ones that do all of the music in the films, in the Super 8 films. And they're like this dark ambient, spooky metal folks. Yeah. It sounds so fucking cool. And this movie overall is like very metal, which I'll get into later. But for me, I'm the opposite. I'm going to absolutely disagree. I understand why the found footage element. I mean, if I'm watching a found footage movie, absolutely. I want as little sound as possible because it doesn't make any sense. There's elements in this movie, absolutely, that I could understand that if you have a hard time suspending your disbelief, it's not going to work for you. Yeah. And that's, I think, one of the elements that you kind of just have to just forget about it, because also who's filming these? Yes, aspects of it are filmed by the children. Yeah. But there's other aspects that who else is? Is Bagul doing it? Again, you can't think too much about it.
Yeah, I agree. And now that you bring up that point, like that was the only thing that really distracted me, right? Because I do like elements of the score, and like there was a moment where you don't hear it, and then you hear it again, and it's quiet, and you hear it again. You're like, whoa, like I like that, because I've heard that in other horror films where it's like this really awesome soundtrack, and then it's quiet a bit, and then the amps up that fear. So I just feel like it was overused too much for me.
Gotcha. Let's talk about the films themselves, because this movie opens with like the main death, the main film, the Super 8 film of the death where the family moves into the house. And these are spooky. These films of the deaths of these families is spooky as hell. This movie overall is very dark. It's macabre. There is a lot of darkness and intrigue in my mind in these essentially snuff films, folks. And that's spooky. It's a kind of, it's dark and disturbing. Those films, like, they look fantastic. It's grainy. I love how it's shot with like minimal light. There's just like usually like a flashlight. It plays on our fears of like fire and drowning and hanging, pain, death. Like, They are dark.
Well, it's like that juxtaposition between like a moment of pure joy and bliss with his family.
Absolutely.
They're unaware of what's going on. They're just being a family. And then the next cut in those films is like their brutal murders. You're like, oh my God, who is filming this? And why are they filming this? And all these questions go in your mind. And I agree with you. That is one of the things I like about this film.
Right.
Is just how those films come out. They're crazy dark. They're crazy brutal. And they're very, you definitely get a very occult vibe. They're all very ritualistic.
Yep.
In their murders. Yep. So like, and I will say my favorite, like I said, there's elements where I feel like this film is overrated and I don't really like it. And I wouldn't myself go and watch it again, but there's elements that I do like it. I like the last 20 minutes of this movie because of how super dark and grim it gets. I'm like, ooh, especially when we get into the Bagul and a little bit of his folklore. I'm like, ooh, let's do a folklore treatment of the Bagul, everyone. I would watch that.
Oh, like a folk horror. Yes, I would absolutely do that because Bagul, I think, is such a fucking awesome creature design, demon design. Give me the eater of children, please. I love the makeup design so much. And Bagul is metal as fuck. Like this movie is metal. Bagul is a metal demon. It's just very me.
and this is what I mean. Like there are elements to this film that I'm just like, if you played up this element more, it would make it a better film in my mind. And I remember saying like one of my like final thoughts was like, take this script and just like readdress some of the holes and like amp up some of the more other elements and take away from my biggest dislike of this film and it will be great. I would be on board.
Right. So make a completely different movie with Bagul.
Yes, exactly. Which is folk horror realm. Add some metal in there, right?
Somebody make it. Everybody watching and listening, filmmakers, listen to us. How about that should have been the sequel and not what the sequel is?
I've never seen the sequel. Have you seen it?
Don't need to. Yes. Okay. Don't need to talk about that one. Anyways, what's your next dislike? Tell me. Give it to me.
My next dislike is the lack of character development. We know very little about this family. I don't even remember the wife's name. And then I end up having problems with her throughout the film and her decision making and her constantly forgiving a very manipulative, narcissistic man. And I just wanted more of the family. And that's what he said. Yeah. So that's so very little character development of like interesting characters. Even the officer who I end up liking when you kind of think of him as like a dumb kind of like he's just like a
deputy so-and-so.
Deputy so-and-so. He's all but he's actually intelligent and he's like calling out Allison on certain things. I'm just like, ooh, I want to see more of what he knows.
There's more of him in the sequel. I only watched the sequel once. There's more of him in the sequel, but I feel like the sequel is super cheesy. But yeah, there is more of him. You know what? Again, I can definitely understand that. I can forgive lack of character development for all of the other things that I love about the movie. The spookiness, the Bagul, and I'm gonna come in with the super nerdy thing of cinematography and the usage of color.
All right, do it. Yeah, explain to me because there's a lot of darkness in this film, and then there's like a moment of light.
This movie is so rich in the usage of color. The house itself is beautiful. The dark woods, the navy blue walls. There's a lot of using complementary colors of blue and orange. Okay, a lot of that. So orange is representative of warmth, happiness, and youth. Blue is melancholy, calm, isolation, passivity. But blue and orange together are complementary colors. And I got this because I always go to Studio Binder. I love Studio Binder for learning and looking up stuff about usage of color in film. But the use of complementary colors like blue and orange, the goal of using that color palette is to create a visual life in the frame.
Okay.
So having this richness of this maybe underdeveloped family, just juxtaposed with the grainy, macabre darkness of these films is just very, very striking to me. And there's a lot of wide shots. And I just think this movie is so stunning. It is beautifully, beautifully done. And I am a big fan of movies that have very rich cinematography and details like that. just different aspects of using light. Like there's certain elements and certain times when Ellison is watching the films and there's like the odd lighting in the room. You can just see like all these shadows and just like a glimpse of the side of his face, and he's drinking. It's just like everything is just very meticulously done. And I respect and appreciate that so much, so much. It is a stunning, stunning movie.
Yeah, definitely. There was an element in the film where you're watching throughout it. It's very dark, a lot of darkness and stuff like that. And there's that one final scene where, in my mind, Ellison has his realization that he's been endangering his family the whole time, where he's been sleeping on the couch and he wakes up and he's like shined by the sun and be like, hey, realize that you've been living in this darkness this whole time, that you've been endangering your family. Get the fuck out and leave.
Yeah.
So that was, I remember that, putting that out really as an element of the film that really struck me. I was like, okay, is this, Ellison coming to for a moment?
Yeah.
Which I like.
Ignoring the harbingers of death that keep coming. Scorpion, a snake, and the Rottweiler.
Right? Like, just
hello.
So many red flags, and yet he ignores every single one of them, which leads me to the biggest dislike of this film, and that is Ellison as a person, as a character, as he is just the worst.
Wow, the worst. Wow, scathing review of Ellison and his cardigan, man.
I remember when I first saw this film, I was like, ooh, I like that cardigan and stuff like that. But I remember, but the way he treats his wife, the way he is with his family, he is just so fucking selfish. And how he doesn't tell his wife that they've moved into the house where an actual murder was committed. And he keeps...
Technically not in the house.
It's still a murder scene. Like, that's something you tell your wife, especially when she's like, hey, remember last time you moved us closer to the murder scene before? Remember the hell you put us through then? Don't do that to us again. Promise, I promise. And she always believes him. And I'm like, stop.
Yeah.
He is narcissistic. He's a pathologist. He's a liar. He's lied to you so many times. And like, he is obsessed with his 15 minutes of fame and recapturing that because of his Kentucky blood days and that success. But he keeps saying, he's like, no, I want to give voices to the survivors. I want it. But he keeps saying, like, I can bring us in money. I can do this. And I was like, this is the whiteness of true crime again. Here it is. We have a white man writing about true crime, saying he's giving voices to the victims, but yet he's profiting off of it. And that's all his main goal is.
Absolutely. So. I can definitely understand that. I don't dislike Ellison. I actually have some form of sympathy for him, particularly when there's the big blow up. Absolutely. You should have told your wife you moved into a murder house. Absolutely. 100%. Yeah. I believe in explicit, honest communication. Would she have said yes? No. And that would have made this different. You could have moved into the same town. Whatever. It's dark. It's very disturbing. Would I have moved into that house? Absolutely. Should you have told your wife? Yes. But there's the big blow up when she is reasonably upset about moving into a murder house. However, there is a moment when he is trying to poorly explain his reasoning for doing all of this. He's like, this is my legacy. I could go and edit textbooks and shit like that. Essentially, no, that is very degrading work for somebody that is a writer. Yeah. That's not the work that he wants to do. And she's like, we are your life. Your kids in this marriage are your legacy, and this is your life. We give your life meaning. And I was like, bitch, no.
I don't agree with that either. Yes.
Bitch, no. I understand his desire for something beyond his marriage and beyond his kids. That is just one aspect of his life. And I know that, like, I guess, yes, Jess, you would understand this too. Yes. But I just was very adamantly opposed to that woman in that moment, because even though I think Ellison is going about things in the wrong way and not communicating effectively, I understand where he's coming from. Mm-hmm. He wants his life to have more than his home life. And that is not something to be frowned upon. That is not something to be ashamed of, because our lives do exist outside of the home and our domestic sphere. So no, bitch, no.
No, I completely agree with you, because I've had my own experiences with that, with being like, no, children should never be your legacy. And I kind of had like a ha-ha moment at the end when it ends up being his daughter, Ashley, spoiler, everyone, killing him. And she goes with Bagul, and it's like, okay. And I remember having the thought being like, okay, well, your legacy will carry on because there will be a book written about you and about this weird disappearance of your daughter. And like, so there's your infamy now. True crime. People are going to gobble that up. They're going to love that. So, and you got that.
You become a victim in your own story. Absolutely.
Exactly. So, and I agree with that. So it's just like, I remember being like, that's a haha moment, but I agree. Children shouldn't be your legacy, and if he wants, and I would have been more on board with Ellison as a character and looking to be able to find some sort of sense of self in his work and stuff like that. But like, I feel like the script needed more work in the decisions that he makes to really make it a better character development for him, because
for sure
I don't feel anything for him throughout it. And I just get angrier and angrier with every decision he makes. And he continues to make things worse in the situation instead of just being like open, honest communication. And then when it goes back to that conversation he's having with his wife, and he's like, I could bring money to support us. I'm like, dude, I get it. But at the same time too, though, like, you're profiting off of true crime, and this is something that is a problematic industry within itself. So
absolutely. We have a whole episode on this, folks, on the Scream franchise. So if you want to learn more about that and our thoughts and feelings, go check that out.
So I just feel
but absolutely.
If the film would have changed his motives a bit, like maybe if you realize and you get that more like folklore-y ritual aspect, then I'd be on board with it. And that sounds like something where I think this film would have done two things I really liked that this film did really well, and I wish I had gotten more of, was the children. So I love it that it ends up finding out that it's the children conducting the murders. That is grim. That is like, absolutely. I remember when I first saw that, I was like, oh my goodness, that is creepier. And I wanted to see more of the creepiness of the children being amped up. I feel like we get these weird moments with them throughout the film, but nothing really kind of adds up. So I would have loved to see more of that like gradual progression with the children experiencing more of the mental instability. And then I also feel like the film itself changes tone. And then when it seems like Ellison himself is kind of starting to lose some of his mental imbalance, I feel like there's points in the film where it kind of feels dreamlike when he's walking down the hallways and they're so really long.
There's a lot of hallway shots. Yep, absolutely.
And I can understand that, because like if you're living in a home and you're surrounding yourself with evidence and trying to get yourself into the minds of both the murderers as well as the victims, so I love that element of the story, and that if they could have amped that up just a little bit more and made it less about the money and more about like he's like trying to absorb himself in this world.
No, that makes sense. Instead of us speculating the reasoning why he wanted to be in the murder home, besides the obvious of being close to where it happened. Instead of speculating, how about we just learned that all comes back to script writing and character development. So I get that. Again, I can forgive it, but I can understand why one would not forgive it if they're watching a movie that they want to be engaged with.
And I think that's where I am with like I was going to say Stir of Echoes, but that's only because when I finished Sinister, I was like, Stir of Echoes is a much better movie, and Kevin Bacon is much nicer to watch.
I would agree on that.
Definitely, right? But I agree with the points that you're bringing, that as the film as an aesthetic, the film as like a film visually, it's wonderful. Visually it has a lot of wonderful things, and I wish they would have more, but like, for me, I can't get past the script. I can't get past the dialogue at points.
Right.
Because I feel like there's so much richness in the plot that could be further explored. Like I said, we said earlier, Bagul is a really interesting character, and I think if we do if someone did a folk horror treatment of that, of the Bagul, and like really amp that up, I would watch that in a heartbeat.
All right. Let's see. Were there any moments that like you felt spooked, or have you never been spooked by this movie?
Oh my goodness, I love it, because I actually have a got me moments that I put out. Like I actually,
excellent. Okay.
The moments where I jumped, and there's 3 moments in this film that they got me the first time and they got me a second time. Trevor coming out of that damn box.
Oh my God, yes. When I saw that for the first time in the theater, I just about died. I think my soul left my body quickly and then came back in.
I remember seeing it for the first time and it got me. And the second time when I saw the box, I'm like, okay, I know the kid's gonna pop out of the box, but I forgot how it happens. And I was like, oh no.
It's all contorted and weird and screaming. Absolutely not. If you've learned anything, I do not like contortionists, body doing weird things. And kids have like the weird, like spindly little bodies because they're children. So no, thank you. Thank you for bringing that up. Yes, no, that was yuck.
The other scare for me is the one video with the lawnmower when
yeah.
And then scary. When you see the Bagul for the first time. So those are my 3 got me moments.
That's great. I really love the moment at the end when the Ellison's little girl, I forget her name.
Ashley.
Thank you. And Ashley like tilts her head and then like Bagul's behind her. So good. And I think that gave me a start when I first watched it as well. It's so good. I'll throw out a dislike. I dislike how much of the kids we see actually at the end. I wish we saw less of the kids.
Yes.
Because they don't look too creepy. Like, I love a spooky child and evil children, which I think they all don't have souls anyways, so it's fine. But I wish we saw less of them. Because also their makeup I'm not a fan of. Like, they don't look that great. So no.
They
like
don't
I wish we just saw them less and maybe just show them to me in the film at the end that Ashley is making that we're seeing up on the wall, just so we know, like,
it was the children all along.
It was the children all along. Here we are. We're all a big happy family now. That is great. But I wish I saw them a little bit less. Like, I really don't like the scene where Ashley's face pops out. Sorry, not Ashley. Oh, Lord. The other missing girl's face pops out from the darkness. I'm sure that's a big jump scare that would get a lot of people. It didn't get me. But she just doesn't look very good. Like, it's just not, I don't like their design as much. They just look like they're dusty, and I'm not. My one dislike is that I don't like I guess it's 2. Show the children less and change their makeup.
Yeah, the creepy children.
Yeah, absolutely. Creepy children is generally a plus. How they were used, minus. Hold on a second. God. This is definitely going to be in the video. That's good.
And this is a part of the podcast recording where Kelly has to wrangle a cat. Probably Mikey. Mikey is probably being bad right now.
Okay. Sorry. There was an inappropriate cat fight happening.
I was just saying, I was just explaining to the viewers, we were probably waiting for Kelly to deal with a cat fight or Mikey being bad.
Oh my God, here we go. Okay, hold on a second.
And for anyone who is hearing this now, Buddy is making noises. Here I am, I'm just gonna.
Crazy cat lady.
I was gonna say, here I am giving the worst commentary ever of a documentary of Kelly's life with her cats. And here is Kelly, the young spinster, wrangling the old cat, humping the bear.
Whose cognitive decline is affecting all of us.
Oh.
Now he's just gonna keep meowing. Okay.
Well, it's interesting that you say that, because one of the things that Sinister received criticism for was its use of jump scares, as well as a lot of horror cliches, which are very apparent throughout this film. But when you said all the things that you were liking about music and cinematography and atmosphere and direction and acting are all things that Sinister received positive praise for.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm. That's where it shines. I can understand the things that you're saying, absolutely, but I think all of the other aspects that I have brought up, the cinematography, the usage of color, the legend of Bagul, how Bagul looks. Some of the jump scares are a little cheesy. I think some of the kids look a little cheesy, but again, I can forgive that for being such a well-created, good-looking, atmospheric horror movie. Do they disuse Vincent D'Onofrio, an incredibly brilliant actor? Yes, but I enjoy the fact that he is there in a really little cameo role. I'm happy that he is in this movie.
Yeah.
Happy.
I guess I'm just not really a huge fan of those films around that time, because it's interesting enough when you had made the survey in our coven about yes, no, and someone had said, you know, usually people who don't like Sinister are like Insidious and vice versa. And I'm actually not a fan of either of them. I remember watching Insidious and not really enjoying it as well. There were some elements of that film I was just like, I don't find that scary or.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
that's fair. Yeah, I did a Twitter poll and a Facebook group, our coven, and everyone loves this movie.
I know.
So Jess, you are wrong. Yet again.
And yet again, I guess.
Back to the prom night versus Hello Mary Lou prom night 2. Your opinion's wrong.
My opinion is wrong. Well, there are no wrong opinions. We all have different opinions, and I am just not a fan of Sinister, the film. But I will definitely watch Stir of Echoes because I think it's a better film with kind of a similar premise.
Okay. Final thoughts. Wrap up your case. Why do you think Sinister is an overrated horror movie?
I think Sinister is an overrated horror movie because it lacks severe character development and also makes Ellison a very unbelievable and frustrating character to watch him go through this whole thing and miss so many really cool things in this film. And I just feel like if this film went back and was either remade and emphasized more of Bagul and played and really just changed up the character development of Ellison and made his decisions and everything more believable, or his pursuit in his goals in life, then maybe I would like this film. But I feel it's overrated just because I just can't get past Ellison as a character.
And there you go.
There's my final thoughts.
And I love and champion Sinister for many reasons. It is a beautiful, stunning horror movie, atmospheric. It is a spooky murder mystery playing with horror and true crime. It has incredible sound design, incredible score and music used in it. This movie is surprisingly metal as fuck, okay? Bagul is this really refreshing, wonderful, spooky, macabre demon and creature. And I just can't not love those films of the murder of all these families. They are so, like I said, so macabre, so dark. It just overall, with all of those elements, makes it, I think, a standout movie, a standout horror movie. And that's it, folks.
There you go.
Where do you all stand? You know, definitely hit us up on social media if you agree, disagree, like, dislike, whatever. You know, let us know. But yeah, that's it for this episode of Spinster versus Spinster. And I guess we'll see you folks next time. Don't know what we're doing, but we're going to do something again soon.
Until then, guys, stay creepy and watch more horror.
Bye.
Bye.